Okay. I would like to call the August 12th board meeting to order. And at this time, as our usual practice is to go around and have folks introduce themselves. What I'm going to do is start with Jason.
Jason Chance.
Mary Heather Noble.
Steve Orzak.
Chip Malcolm.
Joanna Doria. Trisha Allen.
Wendy Baker. Barbara Wilson.
Ellie Rump.
Suzanne Buck.
And is there anyone online? I don't believe there is.
Yeah, that's
Just one.
Emily.
Okay, Emily. Okay, great. And Jen, if you could.
Jen Kravitz, Mary Hogan Principal.
Excellent. And I do know that Laura is joining us. She said she's walking in from the parking lot. Next on the agenda is our time for public comment period. And there's currently, is there anyone online that wants to make a comment? I see there's just Emily. No, there's no public in the room. So we'll just continue to move forward. We have a couple regular agenda items, and then the rest of this will be turned over to training. So the first one is the recommendation to approve the minutes of June 24th. Could I have a motion?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Any comments? All those in favor of approving the minutes, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Excellent, the minutes have been approved. And then moving quickly along so we can get to the training. Chip, if you could give us an update and we can approve the ACSD bill.
Okay. 3 sets of bills that were read by Jason and myself. First one on July 1st, there was just a general account for a total of $576,836.32. Of that $576,000, transportation made up $160,000, and a lot of mileage, just so people understand, when people submit their mileages, it was about $76,000 in that. Now, I think generally you submit your mileage monthly, but that doesn't always happen, so this sort of accumulated, and there it was. Just so the board understands. Second is the bills that were read on the 15th of July. Again, it was just a general account. There was no payroll. Well, I take that back. There was payroll. The general account was, again, a biggie, $1,251,949. $613,921 was in health and dental. $229,400 was in bread. These are round numbers. $65,000 was to Champlain equipment. This is for a new tractor that needed to be done. And $23,580 of that $1,251,000 was for International Baccalaureate. Second was a Vermont Teachers Association retirement amount for $79,924.19, and another payroll of $86,162.81, and another payroll of $195,530.20. Other numbers, folks, sorry about that. The third was bills read on the 29th of July. It was just, there were two. There was the general account for $241,240.45, and a payroll of $313,621.20. A lot of bills, beginning and the end of the year is always a little different, but don't want any issues, and Jason, I presume had none either, so we
I have a question. Does this, are we pretty much, are the accounts closed for the 23-24 school year?
are the accounts, I don't know.
For all intents and purposes, they are. There
Okay.
are a few bits of outstanding revenue, for instance, that we're chasing down, but at this point, it's turned from a revenue in FY24 to a receivable in FY25, and so we're just tidying up the books and starting to send things off to the auditor for audit.
But no major expenses are still overhanging?
Nope.
Nope. Thank you.
I move that we accept these bills as read.
Any other comments?
I have
Seeing-
a quick
Okay, go
question.
ahead.
Just the $79,924.19 was for the Vermont teachers. Can you just repeat what that was for?
Yes.
Retirement.
Oh,
Retirement, yes,
Okay.
okay, right. I was trying to see, I guess it comes under payroll, but I don't know whether it does or not.
Okay.
That's why I sort of,
I just want to make sure I
Payroll
did that
yeah, it
correctly.
was the
And
payroll.
deduction.
Okay, perfect.
Any other? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor of approving the bills as reported by Chip, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the bills have been approved. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Baker. We have some personnel appointments and resignations. Do you need to say anything at this?
Only that as you probably remember, you enabled me to go ahead and complete summer hiring in the month of July in between board meetings so that we didn't lose anybody. So everybody on this list, typically Suzanne reads them aloud, so I'll leave that to her, is fully processed and approved. You know, we have one step left to do in terms of offer finalization with the last appointment, but otherwise, everything is all set to go.
Excellent.
Yep.
Can I have a motion?
I guess it's become me.
Yes.
I move to approve the following personnel appointments and resignations. Ashley Bissett, pre-K coordinator. Andrea Blodgett, paraprofessional. Tina Glide, school counselor. Jeannie Cash, paraprofessional. Craig Delarry, individuals and societies teacher. Jessica Frances, paraprofessional. Charles Gerner, paraprofessional. Jackson Gosha, school counselor. Aidan McCullough, paraprofessional. Sarah Nadeau, classroom teacher. Samuel Standard, ground technician. Kelly Zolli, paraprofessional. A resignation of Justine Grace, a paraprofessional, and Christine Everett, special ed administrator.
Thank you. Can I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Lori Heather. Any questions? Steve?
Would Sarah Netto be the same Sarah Netto that was a teacher at the middle school for so long? Is that the same person?
Taught
It's
at,
number 10 on the list.
she taught at Shoreham and was a kindergarten teacher. I mean, she goes by Sally.
Yes, Sally, yes. Yeah.
So it's not Sarah Netto, the
No.
middle school teacher? Okay, just wanted to check.
Any other questions, comments?
Just, the way that you read the last one, it sounded like they were both resignations, but the very last one was not a resignation.
No, it's an appointment.
Christine Everett.
Thank you. Okay. All those in favor, and I'm not going to repeat all the names, thank you, Suzanne, of approving the list as provided by Dr. Baker, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
As per usual.
I'm sorry, okay, thank you, Laura. All right, so that has been approved, your list. Next on the agenda is our board training. So we did that pretty quickly. And at this time, I would like to introduce Judy, Dr. Claire Stein, yes. And she's going to be taking over the rest of it from till the end of this meeting. Tomorrow, we'll most likely have additional folks joining us, administrators and a leadership team, and we thank Jen and Nicole for being here. I really appreciate it. And one of the things I wanted to put in front of folks with the training, and maybe more so tomorrow, is to get board input on having the leadership team really participate as we're discussing. Normally, you know, they provide input when we ask them questions, all that kind of thing. And one of the things that we thought would be really nice with this particular training, since it is really focused on the superintendent, is to have the leadership team participate. And so I just wanted to put that out there. If there's anyone that feels that that's not appropriate, please let us know. Otherwise, I would invite them to participate, you know, today and tomorrow.
No, question, when you say participate, like, can you give us an example? Like,
Well, give their perspective.
Okay,
Yeah, give
it
their
is the board's responsibility to do that.
Yeah, no, give their perspectives and
So-
input, yeah.
Just
It's
so that-
still our, yes, it's still all our responsibility, but they could definitely give us, you know, their perspectives, and
So
we can
It
listen.
was just a clarifying,
Yep.
so that everyone would understand. That's
Yeah, thank you, Suzanne. Yes.
Was it communicated to the leadership team about tonight and tomorrow
Yes,
already?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, they've been given an invitation, and tonight was really optional, because it's really part of the training, and so I would imagine tomorrow we'll probably see a few more folks. Of course, they're kind of busy, getting ready for the school year. Yes. Okay, so Judy,
I have a
oh, I'm sorry, Steve.
Will there be an opportunity later to talk about the staff's role in the evaluation portion? Goal setting is a little different, but evaluation in a public setting,
Right.
I would
I
like
think-
to know more about that.
Yeah, and I think at this point, we're going to have training, and then we're going to define kind of the process going forward. And so, yes, as a board, we can decide, you know, how we want that to happen, right? And what we'd like to have happen. So, yeah. So there's nothing set in concrete at this point in time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, and I'm just delighted to be back with all of you. I think the questions that have already been posed are questions that will get answered as we go through the 2 nights of training today and tomorrow. So, I realize those of you who know me and know that I'm quite the planner. I am type A as they come. And even though I plan, I realized when I got here that I had 3 documents that I had forgotten to email to be copied, and you know, this throws me out of whack, which you're going to find out in a couple minutes how you function, because we're going to do a variety of things. I promise you I'm going to try to make this as engaging as possible. Those of you who know me know that I sat down, tried to spell out everything that I wanted to say to you, and I'm sure I still left out certain things. But a couple things that I want you to know. And I'm not sure that we've met, have we?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Tell me your name. Laura.
Laura.
Okay, good to see you again. I said hello to all the other board members. So when you hired Mac and Jake to lead your superintendent search, one of the things that you paid for is happening tonight, and that is Phase 5. I don't know if you remember hearing about it, but Phase 5 is where we come back and we work with you as a board, and the we is me, to look at, now that you've found a superintendent and she's been at it with you since June officially.
Yes.
Now we get together and we look at roles. What is the board's role? What is the superintendent's role? And so when Barb reached out to me and said, would you work with us on looking at superintendent evaluation, because it's been a long time since we've done that as a board. Of course I said yes, but in planning for this training, what I learned is that phase 5 very naturally flows into superintendent evaluation. So I will be sort of jumping around a little bit. You'll hear me say things tomorrow night that will go right back to what we will have talked about tonight. And so we're going to start with that phase 5 work, which looks at the roles of the board and the roles of the superintendent. And when we get very specifically into superintendent evaluation, one of the things that's important for you to know as a board, and for you, Wendy, to know as the superintendent, and I'm sure you all have already discovered this, you as a board and you as the superintendent are really functioning as a team. You link arms and you work together. Yes, and you heard me say this when we went through the superintendent search. Yes, one of your most important jobs is hiring the superintendent, for sure. So that she can lead the district and administer and administrate the district, and you can govern in the district. But you must work as a team. I bet you already are good friends with Wendy. She knows that she reports to you as a board, but you have to be a team together. And so one of the things that we're going to work on tonight is what are those roles. So I apologize that the header on this evaluation doesn't say roles and superintendent evaluation, but it should. So I'm going to ask each of you to take one of these little cards, and I want you to just write down what you hope, one thing, I know it's hard, but I'm limiting you to one thing that you hope will come out of this training. And the reason I said one thing is because I do have a slight impression of working with your board. One thing that you hope will come out of this PD. And because Jen and Nicole, yes? Because Jen and Nicole have made the effort to be here, I'm going to ask them to participate in that as well. And one of the questions was, well, is leadership involved in superintendent eval? One of the things we'll talk more about tomorrow, because Wendy and I had a long conversation about this. She's trying to be a very open, transparent kind of leader, and she wants her leadership team to understand what's involved in her evaluation because she's responsible for evaluating her leaders. And so that's part of why she invited her leaders to be here. So one thing that you hope will come out of this training about roles and about superintendent eval. Take just a minute to do that. And because I like colors, you don't each have the same color. Okay, not writing a book. One thing. And I'm not demeaning you when I say that, because you will feel me try to limit you in, and it's not going to feel good, but you'll feel me try to limit you in number of goals, in superintendent goals. It's done very intentionally. All right, who would like to start in sharing the one thing you hope will come out of this training? Who would like to start? Doesn't have to be the first person at the table. I need one person to volunteer.
Jason, yay, Jason.
Okay, Jason.
A clear and thoughtful evaluation process.
Thank you. Mary Heather?
A board understanding of the boundaries between board and district office, so we reduce the impulse to micromanage.
Thank you. Steve?
That the superintendent will understand that her role is to remain objective in disputes among different board factions.
Thank you. Uh-huh.
measurable, clear metrics for evaluation.
Work toward a coherent system which can be used every year comprehensively to evaluate the superintendent.
Thank you.
Cohesion between team members.
Thank you.
Right, similar to Laura, clear criteria and metrics for the process.
Wendy?
Clarity.
And similar to what was already said, how to identify realistic, measurable goals.
Towards also clarity for both board and Wendy about what and how the evaluation will cover or look like.
Thank you. Suzanne?
A clear understanding of roles and responsibilities of both parties.
Thank you. Jen?
To understand the board's goals for the superintendent and thereby those working in the district, as well as to understand how they'll be assessed and evaluated.
Thank you. Nicole?
Clarity for the board, the superintendent, and for the community as a whole.
Well, I'm done. It's been great. Excellent. Excellent work. Hang on to those. I think we'll put them together in a list because you've nailed it, both for roles and superintendent evaluation. All right, now, if Matt's trained me well enough, I want you to look at something and study it for just a minute. Okay, Matt, let's see how I'm gonna do.
This is a test.
All right. Okay, you may have seen this before.
Is that cheating if he's helping her? I thought it was a test.
It's the second step of training.
Oh, I thought it was a
That's
test.
right. She's an educator,
Show
right?
somebody and then have them do it with you, help it, and then by the third step, show them.
Okay,
Shoes to teach us how to do it.
and. Right here.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay, you may have seen this.
And you just have to scroll it.
Let's see if I can do it
So where it says 100%.
I'm so glad you stayed. I'm that C student who needs a lot of guidance and positive reinforcement. So you may have seen this in your life, but that's okay, we're going to look at it again.
Oh, there we go.
Okay,
There.
just study it. Resist the desire to talk for a minute. Can everybody see it? Okay. On your little card there, flip it over and just quietly write down what you see. Now, if you see multiple things, that's okay too. Just write down on the back of your card what you see. Out of the way. Okay, who would like to start by sharing what you see? Have a different person start this time. Don't be afraid. Tricia?
Well, sure. It's a beautiful woman looking away from us.
Okay. Wendy, what do you see?
Same.
Barb?
And,
Oh, go ahead, Wendy.
and
What-
other things, but I'll
But-
only say one.
That's the
Okay.
first,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I
First.
see, the first thing I saw was the beautiful lady, but then if you look at it, you actually see the profile of an older woman with a large nose and mouth and chin down low.
Okay, so
Yeah.
Barb, you see both a beautiful lady and an old woman.
Yes.
Wendy, did you want to modify your what you see?
Oh, I see both.
Okay.
I mean,
Tricia?
so yes, I see both, although every time I have to remind myself of where the crone's nose is in order to get that
I had to do the
picture
same thing.
to click in my brain.
I had to do the same thing.
Yeah, I see both the young woman looking away and the older woman looking down.
Suzanne, what do you see?
So I immediately remembered this and I was like, oh, young woman. Then the older woman with the nose and the very low chin. And then I'm still drawn to the highlighting above her head, which reminds me of a lion.
Okay. Jen?
A young rich woman and an old crone.
Okay. Nicole?
I see a metaphor.
Jason?
I saw the lion at first because we were zoomed in, and then I saw the young woman next.
Mary Heather?
I saw the young woman first and then the profile of the older woman second.
Steve?
Both.
Laura?
I also saw both.
Chip?
Pensive thinker,
Okay.
but you have to change how you look at it.
Joanne?
I see both women, but I don't see the line.
Okay. I used to be able to see both. No matter how many times I look at this, I only see the young woman.
Interesting.
I know there's an old woman there, but I cannot find her.
Yeah.
So why are we looking at this? What's the point?
We're all gonna look differently.
Why did I choose to show you this?
Multiple correct answers.
People see what they want to see.
Multiple correct answers, see what they want to see. What else?
All come in with different perspectives.
But it's fascinating that you can't see certain things, some of us,
Yes.
and that's scary when somebody else is saying, what do you mean? Look at it. And so
Yeah.
that's, it's disconcerting a little bit.
And I'm willing to admit it to you. I mean, if I was on the board, I'm willing to admit it to you that I cannot, no matter how hard I try. I've looked at it, I've used it in trainings, I sat in my office at home as I put this together and looked, okay, maybe this time I'll see the, I just can't see her. I used to be able to, why can't I not now? But what if someone wouldn't admit it?
Sure.
Okay, so let's keep talking perspectives. So I have a little quiz for you. No right or wrong answers. It's all about you. And please don't start it yet.
Matt, are you playing along?
Huh?
Are you playing along?
I'm gonna
What
continue
you?
my
I know you have to leave now. But on this little quiz, it says personality styles inventory. Remember? No right or wrong answers, because this is all about you. You don't have to turn it in. You don't have to turn in anything that you've done so far, although I would like to at least borrow your cards so that we can capture what's on the list. If you would feel more comfortable giving them to Barb, and then I'll get them back to you. But I loved what you came up with on your list, so I think we need to capture those. All right. Look this personality inventory over, and you're going to start, see where it says column 1, column 2, column 3, column 4. Work horizontally and just check the word horizontally that best describes you.
So 1 out of each 4.
1 out of each 4. So spirited, tranquil, fearless, practical. Which word best describes you? And just put a check mark. You're not ranking, just which one word in those 4 horizontally best describes you. And it's a forced choice, so if 2 of them best, if 2 of them match you, pick the one that best describes you. And when you finish, total your checks and mark them at the bottom of each column.
So you don't want to be one of these.
Well,
There's still time to change your life.
I know, yeah.
I think, they're shared.
I think this is your file.
Oh, slash shared.
I mean,
Okay. If you see something you like, just go for it.
okay, anybody still working?
I'm gonna move over here just in case you need technical assistance.
No, I think I'm okay.
And you get your own pile of candy now.
Now I have my own pile of candy, which is really what it's all about.
All right, so you don't have to share if you don't want to, but I passed around a sheet that has the 4 personality styles on it. Some of you will be close between the personality styles. I took it again today. I don't like my results, but they fit me to a T. We are who we are. So I'm just going to ask you to share your personality styles, because if you've had a chance to look at the descriptors, we're not going to spend a lot of time on this because I want to keep us moving, because we do have a packed agenda and I don't want to shortchange superintendent evaluation. But I think it's interesting all around the idea of understanding other people's perspectives. And we're going to get into norms. I did decide to take a little time around that. and we'll talk more about that in a minute, but enthusiast, mainstay, taskmaster, and analyst. So you've looked at those. If we had more time, I'd actually ask you to go around and guess each other's personality style. I will start us off just because many of you got a flavor of me and who I am. I know it's been several months, but just to kind of give you an example, I will choose to share mine with you. My highest score was under analyst. That definitely fits me. My next highest score was taskmaster, and that definitely fits me too. I had 11 under analyst and 8 under taskmaster. And I look at those and I think, things to work on. Yeah. And I don't love that that's where I fall, but that is where I fall. So I'm going to just ask you if you would like to share, share. If you don't, just say pass. Suzanne.
Mine were the same as yours, analyst and taskmaster.
Okay, Suzanne, you and I've known each other a long time. Do I find it, am I surprised? No. Which was your strongest?
Analyst.
Ellie.
I was mainstay, 12, and the closest to that was 6 under taskmaster.
Barb?
I had a tie, analyst and taskmaster.
I was mainstay by a mile. Although, as a former middle school principal, I don't know that I easily fall for pranks. So I don't, that part doesn't resonate, but.
And these aren't perfect, but they do give you a flavor. I've had groups say, how come there's a description under taskmaster, but there's not a description under mainstay? I don't know, I didn't write this, and it's not perfect, but it does give a flavor.
Well, and I was going to say, I'm mainstay and there's nothing to work on or problem areas, so that seems correct.
Joanna?
Mainstay by a landslide, 16, and the next one was 6.
Chip?
Analyst 1 and then was mainstay.
I was almost evenly split between mainstay and analyst, with only 2 outside of those categories.
Which was your strongest?
Mainstay by 1.
Steve?
Perfectly tied between mainstay and taskmaster. 8 and 8.
Interesting. Jason?
I was a 12 on the analyst and then tied 5 and 5 for mainstay and taskmaster.
I am a 11 analyst and 8 mainstay.
Nicole?
I really want to be an enthusiast. It's a life goal. I'm tied evenly across the other 3.
Interesting.
Not surprising. We also share a birthday.
No.
What month?
June 15th.
So you guys are
Gemini.
Gemini, for those of you who are into astrology. So, you know, don't go giving this some scientific, but it is interesting. And if you thought it was interesting, save it, because now you've heard what your fellow board members are. It's just another way of understanding each other, and that's the point. And understanding here are 2 of your administrators. They need to understand you, and you need to understand them. Questions so far? Comments?
I wonder if all school board members took this, whether this would be a, because of whatever leads you to become a school board member. Whether the analyst and the non-enthusiast, which is interesting because there was nobody in that.
I know.
Because, you know, you heard me say this, I don't know if you remember it, but you at some point heard me say when you were doing your superintendent search, a school board member is a school district's hardest working unpaid volunteer. I mean, you all put in a lot of hours. And so, raise your hand if you're also a board member somewhere else. I mean, up here in Vermont, that's very common. It's not as common as it is other places. So you guys work hard, and you're very committed, which is a great segue into norms. you all need to give yourselves a pat on the back. I shared this with Barb when we talked last week. You are in the minority in being so far ahead and having norms for yourselves. Very few school districts anywhere have them. They need to. We're going to look at an article tomorrow about superintendent evaluation, and one of the things that it recommends is that you have norms for yourselves. You all have the governance core. I know that Steve has read it cover to cover. I know that Barb has read it cover to cover. I don't know, and this is not, anything to be ashamed of. I know you all have it as board members. I love the book because it's not like, okay, go home and read it cover to cover. But it does have so many great anecdotes in it that are real life. And one of the things it talks about are the importance of boards having norms for themselves. I took the liberty of taking your norms, which I know you know what they are, but I'm going to give them to you again. These are your meeting norms. And I'll explain to you why I'm giving you a copy of something you already have. And also forgive me for killing a tree for this meeting.
We got a lot of trees.
Just, we do. And why we're not doing so much more digitally for the purpose. Can I just give you these to pass around?
Judy, should I put the board norms on here? I can find them online. Will that be helpful to you?
I think we're okay because I'm going to give you something else. Your norms are excellent. And they speak to things that you as a board have agreed to. And I do think, based on some of the things you all wrote on your little colored card, thank you, Suzanne, are maybe not happening even though they are norms that you have developed. I want to tell you a very little story about something I do monthly in part of my life. And that is I work with a school district called the Lee Summit School District. Did I share this with you before?
I don't think so.
Okay. I led the superintendent search for the Lee Summit School District. It's a suburban district in Kansas City. And they apparently felt good about my work with them. And so for the last 3 years, now going into 4, I work with their basically collective bargaining team. The way they do collective bargaining is like the way very few other districts do. Just like you have norms and very few districts and boards do. The way that Lee Summit does collective bargaining is they have a team. It's made up of board members, teachers, support staff members, and who am I leaving out? Administrators. And they get together and we figure it out together. I'm the facilitator of the group. It's very hard for me not to step into my administrative role, but the assistant sup for HR and I work very closely together, and if I step into that administrative role, he's kind of like, Judy, you're facilitator. Don't step back into that role you did for so many years. But we work together. And it's so neat to hear a teacher say, hold it, we need to think about our support staff, not just in money that they should get, but also in working conditions and so forth. And we work through things as a team every month of the year until April or May. And Team Lee Summit has norms. And those norms are in a tent card in front of every person at every meeting. And the norms are very much like the norms you all developed for yourselves. So I took the liberty of taking your excellent norms and putting them in sort of a bulleted format. So I did not change any of the content of your norms. And Jason, if you don't mind, will you just pass those around? Barb shared with me that you do have nameplates. So I thought you might want to hold on to these. This is very similar to what Team Lee Summit does. Only the members of Team Lee Summit have our names on this side of the tent card. And where we sit at the table, we have our norms. And we try to review them at the beginning of the year, of course, but as a reminder, if we're gearing out of control and people are not remembering the norms, as a facilitator, I might remind people about the norms. So I want to go through them with you so that you can look at your norms, because all I did was maybe take out a little bit of the verbiage and put them in a bulleted format. And some of your norms, you might have a statement that holds 3 actions within it. I took them out and made them separate statements. So I want to give you a minute to look at your norms and look at my version of your norms. You don't have to keep this, but I am recommending that you use something like this, or you put it in front of your nameplates, so that through every meeting, you have your nameplate here, and you have your norms here. And that maybe part of your activity periodically is that as a board, in front of whoever's watching, you stop and review your norms. Because I heard from several people, as you went through those little index cards tonight, a desire to adhere to the norms that you've established. And I didn't know I was going to hear that, but that's what I heard from several people as we went through the tent cards. So I'm going to shut up and ask you to look between your norms and the bulleted norms, because I want you to see that the content didn't change. And then we'll talk some more. So if time was not an issue, we'd take markers and colored pencils, and I'd have you each decorate the other side of your tent card. We're not going to take time to do that, but the concept is there. You don't have to use what I've suggested, but I would encourage you, if you like what's on here, that you put them in front of your nameplates. But before we do that, questions, comments on the bulleted format versus the written sentence format. I know Barb said you have laminated copies.
I like the bulleted list. You know, it jumps out at you more than actually having this in front of you, I think. Especially if you're in a meeting and you kind of glance at it, I think it's a little easier to, see it and to identify the different norms that we have.
Jason had something,
Jason?
then I got something.
I thought it was funny as I read through our norms that we had the term "as appropriate" 4 different times, which makes it seem like we're really focused on propriety.
Yes.
And we just have it once here, which is nice, I like that. I like that change.
So the norms we've worked on for a while, since probably 2016 was when we first did norms, and then we've worked on them again. Each time we've worked on them, we've worked on the wording, trying to get them to be more clear, more concise. And also wondering about the numbering of them. Does a numbering piece make them, like, number 1 is the most important versus number 7 being the least important? But going to just a bullet eliminates that. So it makes them all have the same weight, really.
Yep.
And each time we look at them, they become more clear, more concise.
I agree with about the numbering. I think the numbering is a trap. Even though you know it isn't, it does give you some sense that one is more important than the other. And no, that's not really true. But it does depend on the situation. There are times when giving respect in a meeting when you absolutely don't agree is difficult. Now, it doesn't mean you are disrespectful, but it may not always be easy.
Any other comments on norms? I'm bringing you a suggestion. And then, after this week, I fly back to St. Louis. But it's a thought. And I, of course, did not know what was going to come up when you filled out your index cards, but I think I heard it there, the importance of respect, because I know that, because I went with many of you to Two Brothers Tavern, and we had a beverage of your choice after the superintendent search was finished. And you're all good people. And good people don't always agree. And so it's important that stuff we're going to talk about tomorrow night, there's going to be disagreement, but we got to get to something we can live with, to consensus on everything you do. And so, being able to call each other out, being able to, and as I mentioned about Team Lee Summit, we go over these. Our first meeting of the year is on September 12th. And one of the first things we'll do at our meeting is review the norms. And sometimes we'll go through at the end of the meeting and say, Tricia, pick one of the norms. How did you think we did on it? Very purposefully. Or I might write out the norms on a little piece of paper and hand around a hat or a dish or something. And Joanna picks one out of there, and which norm did you get, Joanna? Read it. How did we do tonight? It's very deliberate, but it forces us to really hold ourselves accountable. So, I won't beat it into the ground, but that's why I chose to bring up the norms. Plus, I hope you'll find that the bulleted norms are a little easier to focus on. It's nothing against your norms, because I already told you I admire so much what you've done that you even have them. So anyway, that's it on norms. Questions, comments before we move along, Joanne?
That just reminded me, the Communications and Engagement Committee has been talking about adding a board reflection period at the end of board meetings. And so that just makes a lot of sense, what just happened there, an opportunity.
Yeah.
I think it's actually required. By the new standards.
And you might want to revisit them each year. Do we need to look at them again? And what you just said, Joanna, is maybe that forced cutting them up, putting them in a hat, and everybody take one and speak to how did we do honoring our norms. Okay, first of all, I built in time for a break. Do you want a break? You want to take a 15-minute break? Good? Okay. So let's talk about board roles and responsibilities. And let me regroup for a second. This is straight from Mac and Jake. And these get at, and this was something else that came out from several of you as you shared what was on your little card. Again, I've condensed some of this because you don't need me to talk at you, and a lot of this you know already. But I do think it's an important reminder of what the board roles are. Stuck there.
Do you want me to
Yes.
take and pass? Do that.
Please. And again, I could have put this up, but I sort of want you to have these to refer back to. There are kind of four main roles for the board. You hire the superintendent. You know my opinion on that. That's your most important job. And you got an A+ on that one. Yay. And you establish policy. You are the governing body. You don't work in isolation. Steve, I'm going to ask you a question. If you would rather not share it with me, with the group, just tell me, no, Judy, I don't want to share it. And you shouldn't feel bad about it. But you and I had a conversation like back in January, I think.
Okay.
We were doing some training for Hannaford. And you shared a personal conundrum about being out and about at Hannaford's grocery shopping or at a restaurant or at a county fair, something like that, and how difficult it is to be just Steve, a member of the community, but also Steve, a member of at least two boards, and how you handle that. Do you remember that part of the conversation? I should have given you a heads up, but it stuck with me because it is who you are as a board member and how challenging that is. Do you remember what I'm talking about?
Are you talking about the fact that I'm on the board, I can listen to you, but I can't promise?
Yeah, and how you get approached by
Yeah,
people.
I mean, when you get approached by people, the idea is that they think that you're going to solve their problem. And I don't see that as the role of the board. First of all, there's that whole extrajudicial, you are kind of, you're the court of last resort, and by weighing in on issues, it's very dangerous because you risk that objectivity when you do that. And so when a community member comes to you, you can say, I can listen, but if you're expecting me to solve this problem, I'm not the right person to talk to, because there are channels. And if you don't use the channels, then the system breaks down. And you feel like you can come to me as a person of, I feel in my case, I usually say as a person of privilege, because many of the people that I know in the community are members of the community that have privilege. But it's also important that every voice is heard and that everyone is treated equitably. So those parents that can't show up to board meetings, or they have to have an equal voice. And so the board's role is very much the 50,000-foot role. We shouldn't be involved in the day-to-day operation of the school. And so the conundrum is, how do you stay engaged and active in the community and in the schools and still maintain your objectivity as a board member? Because Hannaford aside, you go into a school, teachers connect with you. They know you from, and they want to tell you all the things that are wrong in the school, and you've got to say, this is not my job. You can't do this, because your one perspective is not the whole story, and I have to be able to hear the whole story. I can listen to what you're saying, but don't expect me to solve your problem.
So if you're in Mary Hogan one day and you're approached, wouldn't you refer them to the principal?
Well, and it depends. If they say that, my kid's having a lot of trouble with this teacher, I would say, have you talked to the teacher? Because you talk to the teacher first, and then you talk to the administrator, and then you talk to the superintendent, and then it comes to the board if it gets that far. But to involve me at this level is inappropriate, even though I'm your personal friend, even though I know your kid, I've heard your stories, but I am not the person to come into that classroom and tell that teacher what to do, because that is highly inappropriate.
Yep. So. And it takes that fortitude, because it's so, on each of your parts, because it's so hard, especially the last thing that Steve just said is, even though I'm your personal friend, we socialize together, we've been on vacations together, but you're asking me to do something I can't do. And so that's where really being cognizant of your roles. So I'm not going to read to you, but I would ask you to take a moment and really read through this, because then we'll talk about what stood out to you. Take a minute and just read through this sheet that says you are a team, the role of the superintendent, the role of the board, and then you'll see on the other 2 pages expectations that you as a board have of the superintendent and expectations of the superintendent that she has of you. So, board members, what do you see as your roles? Let's start with your roles. Decide what's written here. What do you see as your roles and your responsibilities?
When I'm talking to various people, I usually outline the role of the board as being hiring and evaluating the superintendent, working with making policies for the district, and setting the budget. And those are usually the three things, like these are our three main things. These are the actual board work. Beyond this, it's a different pathway. So I was interested that budget wasn't listed under role of the board on the first page. And 1 and 4 kind of serving the constituency and articulating school system goals. Hope, like, yes, we are all here to serve our constituency. And just found it interesting that one of the main roles was kind of that communication and engagement. Cool. Yeah.
Well, you're approving the budget, but it's brought to you by the administration.
Yeah.
So you do have that responsibility, but
Yes.
it's,
And making sure, like Chip's reporting out every meeting of the finances.
Well,
and meetings and
the reason I do is, add these little caveats as to the numbers, because, it seems like every month it's, 350 to 500,000 in general account, and then there's these crazy months where it's different, and I look through it and just quickly, because I want to know, because I've looked at them, but then I add it up, and so that, I just do that for information, even to the point of transportation, and how people are requesting their rightful payments, but you can only do that so much.
well, and
I think you're right about the budget, but I don't look to, I know it could be either way on that. The budget reflects a lot of things, though. It reflects how the board feels about not only what they're going to pay to do, whether it's IB or whether it's anything else, but it also just reflects what we did on negotiations and what we did on other things.
and you want, Wendy, I think you should jump in and correct me if I'm wrong or add to it, but, sure as shooting, if you as board members are not making sure you understand the first sign of something that's gone awry, every newspaper is going to say the ACSD board were not good stewards of the money. I doubt that it made it up here, but the St. Louis Public School Board is all over the news in St. Louis because they've got a superintendent that they put on administrative leave, and there's been misspending. It's a huge school district, 100,000 kids, but they've misspent on transportation. So yes, you have to be aware. Can you add to what I'm saying? Because I do think you kind of walk a tightrope with budget.
The adoption of operating policies to me is in Vermont. That comes into play in terms of budgeting, because what I'm familiar with is that the administrative team presents to you, here's what we're thinking in terms of how we need to operate and what this looks like. And we're helping you to understand those things. This year we'll be bringing forward some ideas about equity-based budgeting and what that might look like, and gaining some consensus about those things. And then as you are approving that budget, to me, that's a contract that you're entering, a three-way contract between the community, the board as a governance body, and the operational team, that this is how we're operating. So I guess that's where I see it in your framework,
Right.
In terms of, all leading to good financial stewardship that is putting, you know, rigorous education at its forefront.
Mary Heather, were you wanting to say
Well, I
something?
think
I know,
Steve just had his hand
I
up.
thought, I wasn't
Keep that
sure if you had your
elbow
hand.
up.
Yeah. Well, again, like Trish, maybe you can explain where this is, but I've always seen one of the board's main roles is oversight, and budget, to me, falls under the oversight role. I mean, we're the ones, as you said in the paper, that are going to get pilloried for not being aware of something happening. And so I see, I mean, I kind of see pieces of it here in this list of 4, but I don't see it explicitly stated as oversight. And I, for a long time, have been told that oversight is one of our main roles. Like, why do we check the bills? Why do we approve, you know, appointments? Why do we, you know, do some of the, why do we check data on, you know, educational performance, spending, all these things? Aren't those oversight roles? So that's my question, I guess.
Yeah, and I think this is one sample that we're given. I don't mean to sound like I'm sidestepping your question, but this is one tool that we're given by Mac and Jake when we come out and we do phase 5. It should not negate exactly what you just said, and I think Wendy's comment about policy, that's contained within that. These are just kind of the overviews of what your roles are as board members and what her roles and responsibilities are as superintendent. I mean, I think we're having a conversation that's really drilling down to, but we also oversee budget and we also oversee this and that. This is just kind of a umbrella for you to look at that talks about main roles of the board and main roles of the superintendent. So I'm not trying to sidestep, even though it sounds like that's exactly what I'm doing. But I think the oversight of board policy really gets at what your roles are, and certainly that's looking at and approving budget. It's kind of a shared responsibility of CFO who is bringing you recommendations, and ultimately you're approving those. Just like your superintendent and her team are making hiring decisions, but you can't proceed until the board approves them. They're administrative recommendations, but the board has to approve them.
I mean, the reason that I bring it up is because it does speak to another relationship that has to occur, and that's that the superintendent provides accurate and timely information to the board. You know, so we can't do that oversight function if we're not getting accurate and timely information from the superintendent. So I think it is a superintendent's responsibility to provide that information to the board. And so it was a piece that was missing for me when I looked at both of them from both sides of that relationship. So just wanted to bring it up.
I think that's fair.
Mary Heather, did you?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the way I'm looking at it is this is like, you know, the 50,000 foot level summary of both roles. And that some of these particulars, like approving the budget, you know, reviewing data that is presented by the superintendent, approving hiring decisions, those are sort of the how-to functional things that the board does, but really our role is to set the course. You know, this is our vision of where we want our district to be and how we want our students educated. And obviously we're gonna hire someone who will help us get there and set some parameters around how we will get there. But we're not, you know, charting the exact course. That's for the educators to do. But obviously we want some touch points along the way to make sure that we're heading in the right direction. And if it seems like we're not heading in the right direction, we need some warning signals. So I guess I look at it kind of like, you know, a flight pattern, and there's always going to be a little bit of this. And we're going to want, you know, alarms and signals to notice when we dip too far down. But I guess I look at it as a much more general role of the board and a role of the superintendent. And I think the elements of articulating the goals and adopting policies encompasses all the work of revising the policies and revisiting the policies and making sure that policies that are no longer working to achieve that, promised land are tweaked, and same with budget, and that, whatever budget we approve, or that which is presented to us, if we don't believe it's going to get us there, then it's our responsibility to modify it, or if we don't believe it's going to be sustainable. So I guess I'm looking at it from a much more like higher level.
I think that's right. Susan.
So when I read it, I was thinking, so this is from Mac and Jake. So Mac and Jake does searches and works with boards across the entire US. So I was looking at it as probably even higher than the 50,000. As high as you can go, because it's like the big umbrella. And each state underneath that umbrella has statutes that govern the role of the board and what schools are responsible for. So if Mac and Jake was to send out something that worked for all 50 states, this would probably be a really thick document and we'd all die reading it. But so I looked at it as the really, really high, and then there's all these little points, and then underneath each of those points, there's a lot more documentation that we can read about in the Vermont state statutes that says, this is what this means, and it goes all these different ways, and then over here it goes all these different ways, so that it's a global document made to achieve work for all states, all boards.
But I do think it's calling it kind of that high view, kind of that umbrella. It still addresses what your roles are that are encompassing the work that does get done.
Yeah, and that's what I said, the umbrella, those, an umbrella has points, that those nice little metal things stick out and hold the umbrella up. Those are those points. And don't get poked in the eye because it hurts.
Oh dear.
Yeah, I was just speaking to your point there, thinking about how in our interviewing process, we had spoke to a candidate who said that in his state that they didn't even deal with the budget. That was the state did that, and the school boards were not responsible for that. So
Yeah.
I wasn't surprised to not see that on this.
And for me, when I first looked at it, I said, I saw it wasn't there, but I thought, oh, we have policies that we have on the books that focus on lots of aspects. And so it's that umbrella again. And had we not had policies, that would be a different story.
Well, and to that, did anybody else want to say something? I don't want to cut anybody off. Mary, Heather, you can say
Well, I was just going to say, the other thing that, for me, that I underlined was the last point, serving their constituency.
Yes.
That our constituency is a broad constituency, and I think still something that our constituency is understanding as a broad constituency. So, and I guess I, again, kind of look at serve our constituency as all of those things, with budget, with policy, with communication and engagement, and with decision making, and being transparent in all those processes. That is part of, those are the elements of serving your constituency, and I think, to me, the most important thing that jumps out is serving our collective constituency, and especially not the squeaky wheel, because we have squeaky wheels in our constituency, and it is very tempting to be drawn in those directions. So.
The policy part of it, we have a lot of policies, okay, and a lot of them are quite old. I know they get renewed and looked at periodically. If Brian was here, you know what he would say, because he wants every policy every year to be evaluated as to whether the policy is effective, working, and whatever. That's wonderful, except there's only so many hours in the day to do that. And so the practical parts of that get a little heavy. But I think for all of us, I think policy is something that all of us have to constantly be aware of. And I'm certainly not doubting myself as having any idea of what some of them say, because I don't read them all the time. But for both new and old members, I think if we're gonna play the policy and adopt them, adopting them is one thing, it's how they play out, how we use them, how we hold the superintendent responsible for implementing them, and how the superintendent then can go back to us and say, this is not very practical. Well, you've already said, you need a policy to determine how we do certain things, and that's gonna be more helpful for you when you do it. So that to me is a really key part of this. Some boards have this policy governance where their whole meetings are real. We've rejected that a number of times when it's been presented to us. I'm not sure that's any better than anything else. I'm not convinced it is. However, the policy seems to be, we need to be a little bit more attuned as individual members to sort of this back and forth between superintendent and us and individuals. So I'm not saying that would be, I'm not saying I do that. I'm just saying, as I think about it, I think it's important to do that.
Well, one of the things you heard me say at the beginning of tonight's meeting is that while this first part has been looking at phase 5, but that I think you'll see it all is interwoven into getting us to superintendent evaluation. One of the things we're going to look at shortly is our board policies that you have that speak to superintendent evaluation. They're very general and very broad. And when we start looking later tonight at the topic of superintendent evaluation, it's very, very detailed. And so this is meant to be very broad, but kind of giving you the highlights of what the board roles are and what the superintendent roles are. If you go and take out your governance core books, it will give you much more detail about board roles and superintendent roles. I'm going to be working with the Hannaford board on Thursday, and that topic is specifically the roles of boards, the roles of superintendent. And for the time that I'm with them, that is all we're talking about. And that's not really what the focus primarily is here with you all tonight. And so I'm not trying to sidestep the concerns at all, but this is meant to be that 50,000 foot view, or whatever you want to call it, of the general roles of the board and the superintendent. I mean, I could really minimize it and say the board's job is to establish policy and to govern. The superintendent's role is to be in charge of administrating the district and supervising all staff. Obviously, Dr. Baker is a very busy woman. She cannot be running every school and doing every job, and that's why she has very talented leaders to help her with that, and she can't teach every single class in the district, and that's why she has very talented educators to do that. But theoretically, her job is to run the district, your job is to govern the district. And so these items that are bulleted here are meant to be the basic roles of you as the board. And so that there are some things left out, I'm not surprised. I'm not trying to minimize it, but that's the general focus of why Mac and Jake has these things listed as the roles. Barb.
Yeah, and I think the key takeaway for me is that we're a team.
Yes.
You know, it's like we have our role and our superintendent has her role, and we have to mesh those, right? In our own lane, obviously, but it's a team, right? And if one part of the team isn't pulling its weight, it's going to affect the other part of the team. So,
Dr. Baker, comments that you want to add to this discussion?
I think, you know, one of the things that is really important as we move forward is the third of the expectations by the superintendent of the board. I like the idea that I get to have expectations of the board. That seems, that's a nice concept. The third one speaks to the idea that it's important that you embrace the concept of operating as a team. And I can't underscore that enough, that together, as board members, you do that, even when you bring different perspectives to something and you work that out and you come together, because if you do, it has a positive ripple effect on every other part of the organization. Everyone follows your lead. And I think that's important. I also think that one of the things that I really appreciated, and one of the things actually that drew me to accept the position is number one and number two. I mean, you're an engaged board, as I've seen you. I feel like if I come to you with information, you're interested in that information. You want to know that information, and you're a group that will read materials ahead of time and ask questions and is deeply interested in those things. And so that is wonderful to work with. It truly is. That feels very supportive. Sometimes it's difficult. You're coming after a day of work, or right, or whatever you've done in your life, and to come here and then focus in on sometimes highly detailed information, at your 11th hour, that's not always easy. So it's not taken for granted, but it's really appreciated in that sense. So, and since I've been here, I've felt like there's a very productive dialogue between operations and governance. Okay, this is Barb and I did it the other day. Like, all right, here's where we are. Oh, I think this part's operations. This part relates, to board work, and that seems to flow very, very naturally and come up in conversation, and so that we're able to move together through things well. So I appreciate the list. It's nice to reflect on the information.
How many of you are parents? Just raise your hand if you're a parent. Okay. I'm guessing because I've gotten to work with you all before and you're such good people, but when I was a kid, which was, I'm learning, a long time ago, I used to brag I was the youngest, and now I've discovered I'm in that old group, but if I went to my mom and asked for something, and she said no, and then I went to Daddy, and he said no, it's like, that didn't work, because they stood aligned. You all must be a united team. All of you, the board as a unit and the superintendent. If there are disagreements, obviously there will be, but you must stand united as a team. All 14 of you, did I get that right?
13.
13?
Yep.
Yeah.
14. All 14 of you.
That's team math.
I know. Oh no.
You must function as a team of 14.
Yeah.
And, when you go out that door, you have to be linked arms as a team of 14. Yeah. I'm not telling you anything you don't already know, but, it's kind of like those norms. It bears repeating. So. All right, we are doing great on time, so I'm going to move us along because we're kind of flowing into this switching our brains into the idea of superintendent evaluation. So I'm going to call a brief break in case anybody needs a bio break or whatever, and let's plan to resume at 6:45. Okay?
Do they have better chairs? They have cushions. That's a great question. Oh, careful.
So again, I know, because in addition to being the taskmaster and the analyst, I'm also clumsy.
No more knee surgery.
Again, right. Again, you guys are so far ahead of yourselves that you have this. And you have a plan, you have a roadmap, you know where you're going, and you have goals that match it. Belonging, access, and success. And so those goals become your roadmap. for what you're going to do. I can't recite it to you, so nobody better quiz me on it, but I have read through your strategic plan. Now, I promise you, we're way ahead of schedule, well, not way ahead, but we are ahead of schedule, so I'm not gonna keep you to 8:30 just for, well, I won't say what I wanted to say, some blank and grins. So I'm not gonna keep you to 8:30 if we don't need to, but, and Barb and Wendy know this. When tomorrow, we really delve into superintendent evaluation. Superintendent evaluation should grow, superintendent goals should grow from board goals. Because you want your superintendent working on what the board says is important. So in a perfect world, we would be working on helping you as a board develop board goals. That would be, a day workshop where we build, and then we'd move into superintendent eval. We don't have that kind of time. So for this year, this school year, 24-25, we've agreed in our conversations, Wendy, Barb, and I, that because you've done so much work on developing district goals under belonging, success, and access, that for the superintendent for 24-25, she will develop her goals under those umbrellas and the district goals that you all have developed under your strategic plan. But for 25-26, you as a board need to develop board goals under your strategic plan, which, if I remember correctly, is like a 5-year plan, goes to 2029. So each year, you as a board need to develop goals that flow from the district goals into board goals, into the superintendent's goals, which we're going to work on tomorrow. We're not going to delve into that today. What we're going to do is just review the the district goals. So I think that they're on your agenda, if memory serves me correctly. Are they?
Belonging, access, success.
Yes, we wrote them out. Okay. Oh, not the we. I hate when people are talking singular and then they use that plural pronoun. Drives me nuts. What are we having for dinner tonight? That's when the waitress comes, or the server comes to your table and does it. Drives me nuts.
We were sitting at the table.
Yes. So take a minute and just read through the goals that you established as a board for the district under belonging, access, and success. I'm going to do the same thing, just to review. These are excellent goals. So why, if they're so excellent, which they are, why do we want the board, why should the board have separate goals? Starting, in a perfect world, you'd have them now, but why should the board have separate goal focus areas each year that you would develop probably in the beginning of spring, maybe March-ish or so?
I would think to identify the areas that we need to improve and then make sure we're focusing on those
Okay,
to achieve
yes,
these goals.
correct.
And
Steve?
And what the board needs to develop and mature might be different from what the school district needs. I mean, there are things that we do that are not what the school district needs to do. For example, we had a dearth of experience, and so that's something that the board needs to address, not the school district. We had conflict in the past over different agendas, which is something the board needs to address, not the district. So.
And then why does, and we'll get into this more tomorrow, but why do the superintendent's goals need to grow or branch down from the board's goals? Suzanne?
Because hopefully the board's goals not only are belonging access and success, but they're looking out for all students, for all constituents. So in order to do that, the superintendent then has to write goals that support those. It's kind of like writing an IEP, so that those goals support the bigger goals, and then you have objectives and such that give you some guidelines to go by, and if you aren't making progress, then you might have to rewrite and readjust.
And this thing, I'm sorry, Mary,
No,
go ahead.
I mean, I guess I'm just echoing what Suzanne is saying and bringing it back to this sort of direction. Like, both need to have the same DNA to be able to get to the same course, I guess. So, because if they're detached, if they don't have the same DNA, you know, one part of the team may go that direction and another part of the team may go that direction. And it all needs to be informed by this sort of, I keep wanting to say like the promised land.
Public school separation of church and
I
state.
know.
At
But
least
I
that's
mean,
what we
like
hope.
the vision and what, you know, where we want our students and our student education to look like.
The ultimate goal.
Yes.
I guess I just needed some clarity, because here it says district goals, so it's the board's goals for the district, not the board's goals for the board, or are they the same?
It's a great point. So, right now, and forgive me for using we, you all know that I just become part of you until I'm not. So, your district goals are goals for the district, which grew out of, sorry, it's upside down, the strategic plan. And these are the drivers that will take us through 2024-25. And probably beyond, because they're broad. They deal with those big ideas of belonging, success, and what's
Access.
Access. Sorry, such an important one. But they are so broad, and you guys were so smart. There's a better word than that. But you were so smart in keeping them to 3. As board members, and as superintendent, how many times do you think about, oh my gosh, I have so many things going on, I need 5 gazillion hands to keep everything in the air. If you've ever felt that way, and I include administrators, raise your hand. Okay. The purpose of goal setting is to narrow it to the big ideas. So when when Dr. Baker develops her goals, and we talk about those tomorrow, and she's already been thinking about those, because that's going to be a big part of what we look at tomorrow if you peeked ahead at the agenda. What are her goals for the coming year? She's going to and has been thinking about how to build them under those big umbrella ideas, and specifically the goals that you have established as the district goals. Preferably, she would have established her goals under what the board goals are. So there are probably 25 goals that you could come up with as a board, similarly that Wendy could come up with. But we want to narrow them, and your district administrators and your building principals are being asked to develop their goals based on what the superintendent has established and based on the district goals. Yet another reason why, and I applaud Dr. Baker, that she has invited administrators to these sessions. There are I said there are very few boards that would establish norms by now, or norms at all. There are very few superintendents who would have said to their administrative team, I would love for you to come and hear what I'm going to be evaluated on. But through that open and transparent process, her team knows how she will be evaluated because they too are evaluated. Evaluation is part of how we grow. It's not a gotcha. It's ongoing, and it's how we grow and improve. Tomorrow, the last thing we'll do is I will give you a facilitator evaluation form. And I want to hear what you thought I did well and what I can improve on. And there's no place for you to write your name unless you choose to. I want your feedback. How can I improve if I don't get your feedback? So that's what evaluation should be. It's a no, I say this frequently and I will repeat it again tomorrow. Evaluation should be a no surprises document. You don't wait until you present the evaluation to your superintendent to share a concern. It should be ongoing feedback, just as Wendy will be giving ongoing feedback as she works with her administrators. So that together, I told you already a couple times of things that I'm not real proud of. Like, okay, I came up strong as an analyst and a taskmaster. I really wish I was in some of the other sections. And I model, because I tell you right up front areas where I think I have weakness. I told you from the beginning, I had to write everything down because that's me, and I still didn't remember to get all the things copied from the get-go. That's my style. I would rather put it out there myself. That's just me. We all have our weaknesses, and then maybe I can learn from you how to improve on my weaknesses. That's what your superintendent is trying to do by bringing her team in. And so those are things that, and I'm way off track because I ramble. See, there's another one. But that's why we want to write goals, because they branch down. Barb?
Yeah, so in the strategic plan, we have our 3 main goals, and we also have strategies and targets. And so, like some clarification would be helpful for me. I would think, and it could be totally wrong, that we kind of use this framework and then look at it from the perspective, what is reasonable, what's the timeline, we're looking at less than a year of this. What are some things we might want to set as kind of goals, but they're kind of underneath this, under this framework, right? It's not everything. It's like the first year, maybe it's belonging, maybe it's something under there, some specifics that we'd like to see. Is that wrong? I mean,
see for the superintendent to address?
Or for the district as a whole, because we have this document, and I want to make sure that we're moving forward in this document, right, that we've created. And we can't just do it all at once. And we need to what's the priority? What needs to be done before something else, you can even begin to look at something else?
So I think it's fair for you to ask your superintendent to talk about action plan for how she intends to accomplish the goals that she's going to establish tomorrow, but it is not fair to expect your superintendent to accomplish the strategic plan.
Right.
That's something that she and the whole district work on together, including the board. It's another reason why I encourage you as a board to start developing goals for yourself. I'm going to suggest that we table that question until we start looking at the timeline tomorrow.
Okay.
Because I think the timeline will help us, and you will see when I distribute the timeline tomorrow, it's a sample in a watermark on it in big letters, because it's something that we'll work on together and we may tweak. You may want to insert in there a portion that addresses action plan for the superintendent to come back and give you feedback on her efforts to address her goals. There is a place for a mid-year evaluation, or not mid-year evaluation, but a mid-year check on how she's doing. You're really evaluating her on how she's doing addressing her goals. That's really what you're evaluating her on. But we're going to look at different evaluation tools. So let's table that, and I'm going to ask you to bring that up again tomorrow.
Okay.
Joanna, you had a question or a comment?
I guess I was in my head thinking, I had the same question as Barb did, and thinking, is this similar to how policy and procedure plays out? So there's policy, but are there some action steps towards that? Is there progress towards the goal? But like you said, we should probably table it until there's an outline of time.
And I think that we're going to make good progress the rest of this evening and tomorrow, but there's a watermark on your agenda that says tentative, because I'm guessing we're going to be left with more questions than answers, because it's big. One of the things that we're going to look at tonight are two short, actually we're going to look at what the Vermont School Boards Association has to say about superintendent evaluation, and we're also going to look at an article that I found with Education Week, which is a very well-respected publication that we as educators go to a lot. What we're going to delve into tomorrow night is a long article, if you will. I'd almost say it's more like a manual from the Illinois School Boards Association. Steve is familiar with it because we used it through some training that I did with the Hannaford board leadership team and superintendent. I have gone back and researched to see if there's something I like better. I think this is a great tool, and it's not specific to Illinois. And so I think you will, it's too long to get into tonight. We're not even, and I want you to be fresh. But we're going to do it in pods so that we're not going to just sit here and all of us read it. We're going to break it up so that each of you will take a portion, or in small groups you can take a portion. And I really like it, because it breaks down superintendent evaluation, and I think you'll learn a lot about the process that will help us address the question you raised, the question Joanna was going to raise, and then we'll kind of go from there. I really think it's it could be published as a manual, I think. I really like it, and I think it helped guide us. Steve, would you concur on that?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, you presented it, and you presented another one with it. And we combined those two models, and it was like, wow, this is so much better than anything that we were going to wade through.
Yeah, and we're going to look at models of superintendent evaluations and kind of look at those. It's going to be very important that Wendy be a voice at the table. Talking about team of 14, the 14th needs to have a very important voice in what you end up using for superintendent evaluation. And so there's no way we're going to get into that tonight, because I want everybody to come in fresh tomorrow, because that's the first thing that we're going to do tomorrow, is really look at that stuff. Forgive me for calling it stuff, but that's kind of what we're going to do tomorrow. Mary Heather?
I just want to go back to Joanna's question about the distinction between board goals for itself in service of the strategic plan versus board setting district goals in service of the strategic plan, and also just making sure that we have an understanding of, okay, so for this year of Dr. Baker's service to us and her goal setting and evaluation, we don't really have the time to sort of rehash and get specific board goals. So it sounds, at least what I'm hearing is that we're kind of working from these goals, these, belonging, access, and success, and we'll kind of tease something out from there. But next year, the expectation would be, if a board is doing its job correctly, that we would come together as a board and establish specific goals for the year that are reflective of these broader umbrella categories, and that the superintendent's goals for that year would have the same DNA as those. Is that making sense?
That is
confusing
making
people?
sense, and I wasn't trying to sidestep your question, Joanna. I think the answer to those questions will come together sort of organically tomorrow.
Okay.
I don't use that term very often, but I think this will all make more sense tomorrow
Okay.
as we go through the exercises. Because let's say, I'm going to confuse things more.
Okay.
I'm going to just shut up.
Okay.
Because,
We'll hold till tomorrow.
yeah, I think, but hold the questions
Okay.
and come back to them. I don't want to sidestep your concerns. I think, as you all know, I tend to ramble too much, and I'm afraid if I start trying to answer, I will ramble and make it cloudier. Let's come back to it tomorrow.
That sounds good. I think I
Yeah.
just want to make sure that, for me, that I'm understanding that the process that we're doing this year may look a little different than the following year.
Yes.
That we may have more sort of upfront work
Yes.
before. Okay, that's all I wanted to.
And I think when we look at the timeline tomorrow, which says sample large in the watermark, I think we may want to build in time when the board starts looking at board goal setting based on what initiatives you have coming up. Like if a board has an anticipated bond issue, then maybe that becomes one of the goals in terms of forming a committee that, and so we're not going to have in a board goal something as minute as that, but the goal may be umbrella to address what needs to happen so that we get to the little stuff in the work that happens. And it kind of goes back to the conversation we were having earlier, Steve, I'm pointing to you, about, what are the roles that were spelled out on that sheet were more big picture, but yet we know the work has to happen in terms of approving the budget. Why isn't that on there? It's sort of that concept.
I would hope in that process that we're informing each other's goals, there are things operationally that we can't do relative to policy setting that might fill a gap of something we don't have, and we can't move forward to, let's say, achieve, equitable access or achieve equitable success opportunities without those things. So hopefully, if from the operational side, we're providing that feedback based on what we're trying to do, as we're working in this direction, then that informs you, and as you're pulling together what you believe is important relative to direction and what that needs to look like, that informs us in terms of the operational work that we're prioritizing, because we cannot prioritize everything at the same level. I mean, that's not going to lead to quality work, nor administrative retention. So, we want to make sure to keep all the talented, smart people that we have. And so being able to work together to establish those priority areas, I think is healthy for the organization as a whole.
All right, so let's move, and hopefully you can see the connection. I've handed you copies of docs that you may have already seen. I can put them up on the smart board, but you already have copies of your board policies A2 and A3. Because those board policies speak to, in very general terms, your responsibility as a board, or rather, what the responsibilities are for the board in terms of superintendent evaluation. And specifically, and it's funny, I highlighted some things in here a couple weeks ago that address some of the stuff we've been talking about tonight. So if you look at board policy A2, it talks about key responsibilities of board members. And it's funny, we were looking at roles a while ago. If you look at those bulleted items, and you can read all this later, but I'm just going to highlight a couple things. The board shall follow all legal and ethical requirements of school governance. The board shall execute fiduciary responsibility, which gets to the conversation about budget. The board shall hire a superintendent, check that off. The board shall be knowledgeable of its role and responsibilities. And the board shall supervise and evaluate the superintendent. So that's another reason we're all here together. And then I just want you to look at, and I'm going to highlight a couple things in that the first couple of sentences in the first paragraph. The board's responsibility is to ensure leadership success without micromanaging. And then the third sentence, it is the responsibility of the superintendent, not members of the board, to direct the administration and coordination of educational programs in the district. In reading the whole policy, those were the things I thought were most important in this particular policy, specific to the things we've talked about tonight. In policy A3, relationship to and roles of the board and the superintendent, there were a lot more things in here that I thought stood out, so I want to highlight them for you. Second paragraph, the whole second paragraph. The board recognizes and values the superintendent's experience and expertise in instructional and administrative matters. The superintendent recognizes and values the board's experience in issues related to the district and board's connections and responsibilities to the community its elected members represent. I know you can read, I'm purposely reading it to you. In the second paragraph, I highlighted the second sentence. The superintendent works only for the board as a whole and not for any individual board member. And then I highlighted the complete fourth paragraph. Annually, the board evaluates the superintendent's performance through the chair of the board. The executive committee of the board is responsible for clearly setting forth and communicating its expectations before evaluation takes place. Would the members of the executive committee please raise your hands? So Mary Heather, Barb, and Suzanne. The superintendent is accountable to the school board for the achievement of the board's goals. So your policy references board's goals. Another reason, even if I hadn't said it, and it fits with effective practice, another reason the board needs their goals. The executive committee of the board will evaluate the superintendent's job performance in a way that is systematic, fair, and effective, and shall share its review with the full board. So what that says is that your executive committee will develop and write the superintendent's evaluation and will share that with the full board. Okay. Tomorrow we'll talk about if there's any other approach that the board may want to charge the executive committee with looking at, but I wanted the whole board to be familiar with what the policy says. Okay, that's it on policy. I just wanted you all to have a copy of it. Okay. Questions on that? Okay, two more things and then we're going to close for the evening. I have searched, and I really have, Vermont Department of Education, Vermont School Board Association, and this is all I've been able to find from Vermont specific to superintendent evaluation.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I suppose if you pay for it, you can get more This, as far as I can tell, is sort of a commercial, if you will, inviting school boards to hire the Vermont School Boards Association to do what I'm attempting to do with you. But that's all I've been able to locate specific to superintendent evaluation from Vermont.
And you are correct in your observation, this VSBA does look to have districts hire it. And so therefore then the evaluation process is different based on who's hiring and what their needs are. So that's why you probably can't find anything else online.
And the Agency of Education is understaffed, overworked, and is handling almost every aspect of education in the state of Vermont. This is very low on their list.
And what I'm giving you now is a very short article from Education Week. I like it. I think it's very forthright. It's from April of 2023. And part of the reason that I opted to give you so much paper is because this training is more of a, it's more of a mini course, if you will, for you as board members on superintendent evaluation. And this is just the first year of doing it, and I thought it might be helpful for you to be able to go back and look at some of this stuff in subsequent years. And so we'll try to have a folder for you tomorrow to put some of this stuff in, and hopefully it won't just be a folder that collects dust in your file cabinet, but hopefully you will find some of this stuff beneficial. But I'm going to just let you take a minute and read the article from EdWeek. I do think that it's a very worthwhile overview. And so I'm going to just be quiet and let everybody. Like I said, it's very short. It's almost like in bullet points. So let me just let you read this article from Education Week from April of 2023. And I think it also gets to some of that goal question that we were talking about. leaders of leaders in the high group in school. So, what stands out to you from this short article about superintendent evaluation?
It reminded me of what Steve said earlier about asking for information. So once we have a clear idea of what we want to see, then we know when to ask for periodic feedback with specific information.
Clear and objective. I mean, that kept coming through, that the goals need to be clear and they need to be objective.
And measurable.
Yes.
SMART goals.
And ongoing.
And few.
And few.
Yeah, few.
No, but relative to any kind of evaluation, it would seem like, hearing from years ago, teachers complained because the principal wasn't evaluating them a year. And that was this is years ago now, I'm just thinking in terms of a generic term, but that evaluation was so important. Even experienced people who had great confidence in their teaching needed that feedback, maybe just to say, that's really good, you're doing this correct. And everyone wants that type of feedback. Now, some people in professions only get it through good results, okay? And others in a job need that kind of reinforcement or negative influence. So to me, that's, I don't know how the continuing part was the one, I don't know how you do that all the time except for 1 week a year, but yet it's still really important, I think.
Anything else stood out to you?
I'll just mention just the frequency of feedback and that, I like at the college, we have quarterly conversations. And what comes to mind is the sort of schedule or timeline for information that would help us be able to provide feedback. And I feel like, we should probably be working directly with Dr. Baker to see like, okay, so when can we expect some of the data that we would want to use to evaluate and have a sense of when that is dosed throughout the year and take the opportunity to use those times as moments of checking in.
And I suspect Dr. Baker, don't let me put words in your mouth, but I suspect Dr. Baker will want time with you to say, let me tell you about what's going on and the progress I feel like I'm making on this or that goal and work that my team has done that's enabling us to accomplish this. She's going to have a goal, but it's not really a goal that she's going to necessarily be able to accomplish herself. It's a goal that her team and the district works on together. Am I correct on that? So again, you're a team of 14. And so it's not just you asking her to give you time so that she can report back. She's going to want to say, I'm so excited. Let me tell you what happened and the progress that we're making.
I appreciate the framing of it as a conversation instead of as some sort of weird tribunal.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody's worked a crappy job where you have that sort of relationship, and this is definitely, this needs to be something where we're all working together to be pulling the rope in the same direction.
Weird tribunal.
Yeah. Weird tribunal.
Anything else that anyone wants to share? As administrators of the district, anything you want to share before we close?
I just keep reflecting that it really just provides such clarity for staff and parents and for the kids who are engaged in this level to be able to understand what this group of committed people are focused on, what the superintendent's focused on, and then how it impacts what we it really feels like a really nicely woven basket that everybody can make sense of together. So I'm feeling really appreciative.
Thank you. Well, I've mentioned some of this to you already, but when we return tomorrow, we've kind of gotten a taste, if you will, as we've moved into superintendent evaluation. And when we return tomorrow, we're going to dive in and really focus on that, what I would like to call that manual from the Illinois School Boards Association. I have a little, I think, sort of creative way to get you into groups, and then you'll have work to do in your groups to really process that evaluation. And any administrators who are here will be part of that. And then we're going to share what we learned. And there I am, including the we, but I'll work with you on that. And then we'll go through, and you have your agenda in front of you, but just kind of that preview for tomorrow. We're going to really review that manual. We're going to hear, after we get through that, and try to educate each other, because it's just too lengthy to ask everybody to sit and read it, besides it's boring as all get out to do that. So you'll help educate each other on what your group discovered, and then we'll get into the goals that Dr. Baker has been thinking about, and kind of a loose action plan for how she thinks she might tackle those goals. It's a discussion. And we'll work together, you'll work together as a team and talk about those things. Then we're going to take a look at some sample evaluation tools, including the one that Addison Central used several years ago. It's extremely well put together. And so that'll be one of 4 tools that you'll look at. Dr. Baker's insights and input are extremely important to deciding what evaluation tool ultimately ends up being the ACSD evaluation tool. I dare say it'll probably end up being some sort of hybrid because there are good things in all of them. But Dr. Baker has seen them. I shared them with her in advance, and she'll have some thoughts for you as to why she may like one more than another. When I worked with another school district a year ago, there were lots, and some of them were just plain junk. And there's no way I was going to bring you what I would consider junk. Quite honestly, of that particular district, the board does not work cohesively like your board does, and that particular district ultimately went with McCrell, which has an outstanding tool, but it's very expensive, and I don't think that you all are in a mode that you necessarily need a McCrell for your evaluation tool. So anyway, we'll work through those and hear Dr. Baker's input and kind of go from there. And then we're going to look at the actual evaluation process, look at the timeline, and I think that's going to fill up our evening tomorrow. So you can count on candy being on the table, get a good night's sleep, and hopefully we'll have a very positive evening. Before we go, comments from anyone? Other thoughts for the good of the group before we conclude? And I do want to point out that we're finishing tonight an hour ahead of schedule. Just want to put that out. But any comments for the good of the group before we finish?
I thank you very much for our, considering that Steve and I were in another meeting that ran an hour and a half.
I have a question. Do we know if the setup's going to stay? Like, could we leave our paperwork and things here for tomorrow, or should we take all this?
Probably take it with us.
I would take it just because I don't know what this room might be scheduled for other activities tomorrow.
During the day, unfortunately.
Wendy, are there paper clips up here that we can help ourselves to, that maybe everybody can at least clip their stuff?
I split everything inside of my,
I think so.
It's on the other side of that. I think there might be paper clips in there too.
Hey, Barb, per her comment, I think the format, if we're going to use this room for our board meetings, I know this is a little different because we have a facilitator, but we need to be more in a circle rather than right angles, because I can hear Suzanne, but the sound does not go the way it should unless we're in more of an oval thing.
But we also can't see each other.
Well, and Matt,